Are you really ready for this? She thought she was in control, thought she could play by her own rules, keeping him as a safe, constant presence in the background. But what happens when the game flips? When the man she took for granted starts making his own moves? Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from. Now let's get started. The instant my wife asked me to sit down, I knew something was off. It wasn't some deep-seated intuition or premonition, just a familiarity with the moment. I'd seen this exact scenario play out before, the forced cheerfulness in her smile, the restless way she shifted in her seat, the habitual motion of tucking her hair behind her ear. It was a pattern, a well-worn lead-up to something I wouldn't want to hear. I leaned back, setting my beer on the table, and waited. "So," she started, her voice unnaturally upbeat, almost as if she had rehearsed this. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about us." There it was, the opening line of a carefully prepared justification. I remained silent, giving her nothing more than a slow, expectant nod. "I love you," she continued, reaching out to lightly brush her fingers over mine. "I really do, and I don't want to lose what we have." That was all I needed to hear to understand. She wasn't leaving me outright. No, this was something worse. Her fingers tapped anxiously against the table before she pressed on. "But I feel like I need to explore more," she admitted, her voice hesitant. "Meet new people, experience different connections." I didn't react, just took a measured sip of my beer and watched as she squirmed under the weight of my silence. "So what exactly are you saying?" I asked at last. Relief flickered across her face, pleased that I hadn't outright rejected the conversation. "I think we should open our relationship," she said carefully, searching my eyes for any sign of agreement. "Not because I don't love you, because I do, but I think this could help us grow, make us stronger in the long run." She had convinced herself that this was a modern, progressive approach to marriage, that I would nod understandingly, tell her I trusted her, and accept the arrangement of her being with other men while I remained the constant, reliable presence in the background. She had miscalculated. I tilted my head slightly. "So you want to date other men?" She hesitated, then bit her lip before nodding. "Yes. But it's not about replacing you," she added quickly. "It's about—" I raised a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "All right." Her eyes widened slightly. "All right?" I shrugged, taking another sip of my drink. "Yeah, if you want to see other men, that's fine, but it only makes sense that I do the same, you know, to keep things equal." The color drained from her face. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice suddenly uncertain. "I mean," I said, slow and deliberate, "if you're going to be meeting new people, then I should too, just to make sure I'm not missing out on anything better." She barely flinched, but I saw it. It was brief, subtle, but there. This wasn't how she had expected me to respond. In her mind, I was supposed to be the ever-loyal, ever-patient husband who waited at home while she explored her options, secure in the belief that I would always be there when she was finished playing. I had just shattered that illusion. "You'd compare me?" she asked, and for the first time in a long while, I heard uncertainty in her voice. I nodded. "Well, yeah. How else would I know if I'm getting the best deal here?" Her jaw tightened, but she forced a smile. "That's not the point." "Isn't it?" I countered. "You're saying you need to explore so you can be sure you're not missing out. That means you're weighing your options. If you get to do that, so do I." She blinked, visibly thrown off. I don't want you seeing other women." I smiled. "Oh? Because that's not what this is about," she insisted, her voice carrying an edge of urgency now. She trailed off, struggling to find the right words. "I just want to broaden my experiences. But that doesn't mean I want to change our relationship." A low chuckle escaped me. So you want to sleep with other men while I stay exactly the same? She swallowed hard. It's not just about intimacy. Of course it is, I said flatly. You wouldn't be asking if you didn't already have someone in mind. That one landed. A flicker of panic crossed her face before she quickly masked it. That's not true. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. Who is he? She froze. What? I tilted my head. You're not suggesting this because you might want to see other men. You're suggesting it because there's already someone. So who is he? She bit her lip, hard, a nervous habit of hers. That's not fair. Life's not fair, I said, standing up. You just thought you could rewrite the rules without having to follow them yourself. She stood abruptly, frustration flashing in her eyes. This isn't how I wanted this to go. I smirked. I figured. Her arms crossed tightly over her chest. So what? You're just going to throw everything away because I wanted to have an open conversation? I let the silence stretch between us before responding. No, I'm not the one throwing anything away. You are. She sucked in a sharp breath. And in that moment, I saw it. The fear. The realization that she had just lost control of the situation. This was unraveling in ways she hadn't accounted for, far removed from the controlled scenario she had so carefully constructed in her mind. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, stretched so taut that the slightest push could tear it apart. Her face remained composed, unreadable even, but the way her fingers tightened around her water glass betrayed her. She wasn't just uncomfortable, she was unraveling. She had entered this conversation under the assumption that she held all the leverage, that she could dictate the terms of her so-called open relationship, steering it in whatever direction she pleased. What she hadn't expected was my reaction. A subtle pivot, a mere comparison to other women, had thrown her completely off balance. I watched the war play out in her eyes as she grasped at an explanation. I don't see why you're saying this, she said finally, her voice calm but weighted. This isn't about replacing anyone. It's about embracing new experiences. Leaning back, I idly swirled the last dregs of beer in my bottle, feigning detachment. Of course, I said smoothly. That makes sense. Maybe you have a point. Maybe I've been too closed-minded about it. Her brows knit together as I continued, my voice light but deliberate. Perhaps I should explore too, really see what's out there. Who knows? It might make me appreciate what I have even more. Her lips parted as if to interject, then pressed shut again. It's not the same, she murmured. Why not? I countered. She hesitated, then exhaled sharply. I just don't want to jeopardize what we have. That made me laugh, a real, unrestrained laugh that made her flinch. Jeopardy? I repeated. You're the one who introduced this idea, not me. She didn't answer. I let the silence stretch, allowing her to sit with the weight of her own proposal. If she wanted to open the door, fairness dictated that I should have the same opportunity. Why should she be the only one dipping her toes in untested waters? I watched as the reality of it settled over her, the color draining from her face. For the first time in a long while, uncertainty flickered in her expression. In the days that followed, something shifted. Her demeanor softened, her touches lingered longer, her kisses held an unfamiliar urgency. She began coming home earlier, something she hadn't bothered to do in months. Even her style subtly changed, the flashier outfits swapped for something more subdued. I made a point of pretending not to notice. The real fracture in her confidence came one evening as she found me sprawled across the couch, idly scrolling through my phone. "Who are you texting?" she asked, voice casual but edged with something else. I lifted an eyebrow. "Why do you care?" She hesitated. "I was just asking." "Just a friend," I replied with an amused smirk. "Why? Worried about comparisons?" She sucked in a quiet breath. I saw it then, that flicker of doubt. She had assumed I would resist, that I would plead, that I would try to convince her to reconsider. Instead, I played along, and that unsettled her more than anything. That night, she initiated intimacy without warning. It wasn't passion. It was a calculated move, a desperate attempt to reassert control. I refused. The look on her face was priceless. "But you always want to," she whispered, confusion darkening her gaze as she sat up in bed. I simply shrugged. "Not tonight." She barely slept after that. By then, I was sure of one thing. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment idea. Women don't propose open relationships on a whim. They test the waters, gauge reactions, lay the groundwork. She had someone in mind, likely had for weeks, maybe months. So, I did the logical thing. I started digging. She thought she had covered her tracks, but not well enough. A few password resets, some location tracking, and a conveniently placed friend in IT later, and I had a name. Thomas, a co-worker, unattached, older than me. Someone I had met before, even shaken hands with at a company event. The thought of him, standing there making small talk with me while likely fantasizing about her, sent a pulse of anger through me. But I suppressed it. This wasn't about emotion. This was about control. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I let her believe I was still following her lead. And then, I turned the tables. A week later, over breakfast, I casually mentioned I had plans that evening. "Plans?" she echoed, stirring her coffee with a little too much force. "Yeah," I said offhandedly. "Just meeting up for drinks. A friend's introducing me to someone." Her spoon clattered against the inside of her mug. "You're going on a date?" I smiled, entertained by her reaction. "I wouldn't call it that. Just seeing what's out there." She swallowed, her mind racing. She had never truly expected me to take her suggestions seriously, at least not in a way that worked to my advantage. That evening, I walked out the door without a backward glance. I wasn't meeting anyone, but she didn't need to know that. When I returned, she was still awake, waiting for me. "How was your night?" she asked, feigning nonchalance. "Good," I replied simply. Her fingers gripped the couch cushion. The panic in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. "Did you meet someone?" A slow grin spread across my face. "Why does that matter to you?" She parted her lips as if to answer, but hesitated, closing them just as quickly. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, she was the one caught off guard. The uncertainty, once mine, now belonged to her. The dynamic had shifted entirely. In the days that followed, an unspoken tension settled between us, heavy and persistent. She started texting more often, asking where I was, what I was doing. She prepared my favorite dishes, wore the perfume she knew I liked, but I never gave her the reassurance she sought. I let her sit with her own discomfort. And just like that, the foundation of our marriage cracked. She had always assumed she dictated the narrative, but now she watched helplessly as it slipped from her grasp. And I had no intention of stopping it. Not yet. Something in her had changed. The confidence was gone, the self-assured demeanor shattered. In its place, desperation. She hid it behind forced smiles, behind feeble attempts to rekindle what had long since turned to dust. But I saw through it. Every touch, every lingering glance, every exaggerated display of affection, it all reeked of one thing: fear. Not fear of losing me necessarily, but fear of losing control. For weeks, she had been so certain I would stay where she had left me, silent, accepting, watching from the sidelines while she enjoyed her newfound freedom. But now, she thought I was the one stepping outside the lines, and it was tearing her apart. The first crack showed at dinner. She had gone to great lengths, homemade meal, candlelight, an expensive bottle of wine we had been saving for a special occasion. I played along, feigning ignorance of the shift in her demeanor. "So," she said, twirling her fork idly between her fingers, "who is she?" I lifted my gaze, pretending confusion. Who? She let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Don't play dumb. The woman you've been seeing, she clarified. The one you've been texting. A slow smirk curled on my lips. Why does it matter? Her grip on the fork tightened. Because it's absurd that you're actually… She cut herself off, exhaling sharply. I just think we need to be cautious about all of this. All of this? I echoed. You know what I mean. She shifted in her seat, avoiding my gaze. We don't want to do something we'll regret. I leaned back, studying her as she struggled to maintain composure. Like opening the marriage? She flinched. That's not what I meant, she said quickly. Maybe we rushed into it. There it was, the first sign she wanted to take it all back, but I wasn't about to hand her an easy escape. Thomas panics. The next day, I got confirmation that her little affair was feeling the pressure. A blocked number called 3 times before I finally answered. Hello? Silence. Then, a voice I recognized. Look, we need to talk, Thomas said, his tone uneasy. I smirked. Do we? A sharp exhale on the other end. Listen, man, I don't want any trouble. I didn't know. Didn't know what? That you knew, he admitted. She told me it was complicated, that you two were figuring things out. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch between us. I don't care what she told you, I finally said, voice steady. What matters is what's happening now. And what's happening now is that she's realizing she made a mistake. A long pause, then cautiously. Are you going to tell her you know? I chuckled softly. What do you think? More silence. Then, in a strained voice, he said, She's different lately. Distant. On edge. I think she's rethinking everything. Of course she was. I gave him nothing. That's not my problem, I said at last. Look, I just want to be clear. I don't want this coming back on me. And there it was, the real reason for his call. He wasn't worried about her. He was worried about himself. Coward. I exhaled slowly. I guess we'll see. Then I ended the call. She breaks. That night, she snapped. I was on the couch, casually scrolling through my phone, pretending to be deep in a conversation that didn't exist. She stormed into the room, frustration coloring her face. Who is she? She demanded. I didn't look up. She snatched the phone from my hands. You heard me, she snapped. Who is she? I leaned back, watching as she scrolled frantically through my messages. She wouldn't find anything. There was no one. There never had been. But that wasn't the point. The point was that she was unraveling. You don't like this feeling, do you? I murmured. She looked up, anger and confusion warring in her expression. What are you talking about? I stood, looming over her. Doubt gnawed at her, the slow, creeping awareness that she might not hold the irreplaceable position she once believed she did. She swallowed hard, her throat tightening. You were perfectly content when you thought I'd stay silent, letting you indulge without consequence, I continued, voice even. But now that the situation has shifted, you suddenly can't handle it. She sucked in a sharp breath, but no words came. I leaned in slightly, studying her reaction. Tell me, was an open relationship ever something you truly wanted? Or was it just a convenient cover to cheat without guilt? Her lips parted, but no sound emerged. I gave a knowing nod. That's what I thought. The final move was already in motion. For 48 hours, I let her sit in the quiet horror of her unraveling world before delivering the inevitable blow. When she returned from work, an envelope rested on the kitchen counter, waiting. Inside, undeniable proof, every message, every hotel reservation, every call log. And at the bottom, a pre-prepared separation agreement. She took it in trembling hands, her face draining of color as she moved toward the living room. You knew, she whispered, barely audible. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my drink before setting it down with care. Of course I knew. Her glassy eyes searched mine. How long? I shrugged. Long enough. Her breath hitched. So, what now? I let the silence stretch between us before answering. You have two options. Sign the agreement and leave with some dignity, or fight it and make this far worse for yourself. Her expression twisted in anguish. I don't want to lose you. A bitter chuckle escaped me. That's funny. You didn't seem too concerned about losing me when you were sneaking around with him. A choked sob escaped her, but I remained still, unaffected. She had assumed she could have both, her affair and my unwavering presence. What she never understood was that she had never been my priority. Her fingers tightened around the envelope, knuckles white. The evidence left no room for denial. The carefully constructed illusion she had lived behind had shattered, and now she had nowhere to turn. Her voice was barely a whisper. I can fix this. A sharp laugh almost broke free. Fix what, exactly? She swallowed, her desperation creeping into each word. Us. Us. I raised an eyebrow. You mean the us you were willing to throw away for Thomas? The us that meant so little while you planned your little affair? Her breath caught. I wasn't trying to replace you. No, I said, my voice void of warmth. You just expected me to sit in the background while you explored your options. A safety net. A backup plan in case your new adventure didn't work out. Silence hung between us. I could see her mind racing, searching for some way to salvage what she had destroyed. She had anticipated resistance, maybe even an argument, a fight to keep her. But I had no intention of giving her the satisfaction. This was her mess to sit in. One last, desperate attempt. One last gamble. Her voice softened, laced with the same sweetness I had once believed was genuine. I was reckless. I see that now. I don't want anyone else, just you. I shook my head. No. You don't get to say that now. Her eyes brimmed with tears. Why not? Because, I said coldly, you weren't saying it before you realized I could walk away. A strangled sob tore from her. I didn't let her continue. You made your choice. Now you live with it. Alone. She broke then, tears spilling freely as she collapsed into a chair. This wasn't how she imagined it ending. She had convinced herself she was always in control, that I would never leave, never refuse to fight for her. But she had been wrong. And now, she was facing the wreckage she created. She wasn't the only one unraveling. The next morning, Thomas's name flashed across my phone screen. The moment I answered, his voice cracked with nerves. Look, man, I swear, I never meant for this to happen. I leaned back. Did you think I'd just be okay with it? He hesitated. I thought she was serious about the open relationship. She told you I was on board? Amusement laced my words. Yeah. I didn't think she'd react like this. She showed up at my place last night crying. She said you were divorcing her, that it was my fault. A smirk tugged at my lips. And I can't have this getting out. His voice wavered. I have a reputation. I work with her. If this blows up, I cut him off. Maybe you should have thought about that before you got involved with another man's wife. He exhaled shakily. Listen, man, I don't want trouble. Maybe we can work something out. Maybe you don't have to go through with the separation. This story has come to an end. Every choice has consequences. Freedom without responsibility is an illusion. If you're willing to risk what matters most, be prepared to lose it. The biggest mistake is assuming someone will always wait, that you can play with emotions without facing the fallout. But life offers no guarantees. Every action comes at a price. This story is a reminder. Respect, trust, and loyalty take years to build, but only a moment to destroy. And the worst realization? Understanding it when it's already too late. Value those who stand by you before testing if you have a backup plan. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you liked this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.